My name is Debbie Shaw and this is sew.co.uk. Now, most sewing machines will come to you with a standard foot and a zipper foot, but there are many more feet available. It can be a little bit bewildering. The feet are designed to make your job easier and to give you a more professional result. So what I've done is taken a handful of the most used feet and I'm going to show you in more detail how you're going to use them. So this is my standard foot. They will vary in the way that they look from one machine to another. But basically this is the foot that you're going to use for most of your work. If you're using a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, this is the one to use. Most domestic sewing machines these days, you clip on the foot. So I'm simply going to lower the presser foot shank into the foot. That clips it into place. Then I'll take the thread through to the back of the foot, and that just keeps it out of the way so I don't sew over the top of it. It keeps your work looking that little bit neater. The fabric goes underneath the foot, which is nice and wide, so that helps to stop your stitches from puckering and keeps your fabric flat. And I've just chosen this time to do a zigzag stitch. With a zipper foot, most zipper feet will look like this, and there's a little groove on either side, and that means that you can either take your needle to the left or to the right hand side of your work by clipping on with those bars, either in the left or the right position. So if I wanted to take my needle to the right hand side of my work, then I'll just pop the foot onto the bar on the right hand side. However, if I'm sewing on the left hand side, then I can drop the foot off, move it across, clip onto the left hand side bar, and now my needle's close to the left hand side. So if I'm sewing in a zip like this, then I'll need to keep the needle to the left. When I come down the other side, I'll take it over to the right. But if I'm inserting piping and cording into bias tape or ribbon, then I'll need to keep the needle quite close to the cord. So I've got that on the left-hand side of my work. And this helps when you then insert that piping into, say, a cushion cover. This is a blind hem foot. Now this is an adjustable blind hem foot, and the idea is by using this gauge, it gives you the perfect tiny little stitch. So on the right hand side of your fabric, the stitches become invisible. It's always as well to practice on a little scrap piece of fabric first of all to make sure that you have the adjustments right. And again, just like with the previous feet, this simply just clips on and then I'm ready to go. I've folded my fabric and finger creased it where the hem's going to be, and I'm going to put a nice deep double hem on there, and I'm going to pin this, but I'm going to pin it across right at the top just here, because in a second I'm going to open up that hem and sew on the inside so that you don't see them. So I'll just put a few pins across here just to hold that in place, or you could iron that just so that you get the creases nice and crisp. Then fold back the hem. The raw edges have been tucked inside, so I don't need to over edge stitch them, and I'm going to sew on the top of that hem. Now the way that a zigzag stitch works is that you'll have a few straight stitches, and every now and again a little zigzag stitch pops over and just catches a few threads on the left hand side. So where that fold is now, I'm pushing that fabric right up to the gauge, and that helps to keep my stitches uniform. And you can just see that every so often the needle throws itself over into a zigzag stitch. That's the stitch that you need to be as small as you possibly can make it, because the smaller the stitch, the more invisible it's going to be on the right side. So I'll just snip this off. That's what it looks like here. Then when the hem's folded down on the inside of my garment or my curtain, this is what it's going to look like. And then from the right side, remember you're going to use the same colour thread as your fabric. When that's pressed, then you're not going to see any stitches there at all. That's a blind or an invisible stitch. So let's put this into practice on my dress. My dress I've already over edged, so I don't need to put the extra fold in because my fabric isn't going to fray. And all I'm doing is sewing right along the edge of where I've already overcast, and the fold again goes up to that gauge just on the side of the foot. So you'd go all the way around, of course. That's the inside, that's the hem folded down, and then on the right side of my fabric, again remember this needs pressing, but that's where you don't see the stitches. That's a blind hem. Now this is an adjustable buttonhole foot. Some buttonhole feet you'll need to measure. This one, you can actually fit the button into the back of the buttonhole foot. And when you compress that together so it grabs the button, it leaves an equidistant space between these two bars and those are the bars that help the sewing machine gauge the size of the button. This will make more sense in a second. So again, it's a clip-on foot. What I suggest you do is to go down with the needle and just take something like a quick unpick and just pull the thread through from the bottom, so you're not sewing over the top of the thread. Now there'll be a bar on the side of your sewing machine, probably got a picture of a buttonhole on it, and when you pull that down, that's what gauges the size of your buttonhole. So that'll stop the machine from working and it'll turn around and come back down again. So the button will start sewing from the front, so that's where you measure the distance of the buttonholes from. Now, although I've got my foot on the foot pedal, it's over to the machine now because this is going to stop working when it's finished. You see that bar that I was talking about? This is where it's going to stop. It'll do a bar tack, as it's called, with a few stitches at the end. And then you'll notice it's just doing a straight stitch coming down the second side. The zigzag of the buttonhole stitch is on the return. And the reason for that is because if you have fabric that has a pile on it, then it's flattened both in the same direction. When it gets to the end of its stitching, even though my foot's still on the foot pedal, the machine will stop. Now with some machines you will need to stop them, but with automatic machines this is what happens. Then all you need to do is take your quick unpick and cut open the hole. Then you'll need to sew your buttons on, and this is a button foot. The blue bits at the front are rubbery, so they have grip. What you'll need to do is to drop your feed dogs. Some sewing machines will have a darning plate to cover them, but we don't want those feed dogs to move basically. Pop your fabric underneath. You'll have measured where you want your button to go into in relation to your buttonhole. And then you pop your button underneath the button foot and choose a zigzag stitch on your machine. Now I suggest, first of all, you take the hand wheel at the side of your machine and just turn that towards you by hand, just to make sure that the needle lines up with the holes in the button before you put your foot on the foot pedal. And when you're happy that they do, put your foot down, and this is a really secure and easy way of fixing buttons. If you've got 4 holes in your button, by the way, just move the button back again or forward slightly and do the other 2 holes in the same way. Slip off your excess thread, and just to make sure that my button fits the buttonhole that I made in the previous little video, let's put them together. Perfect. Now this is an over edge foot. Again, they'll look slightly different depending on which brand of machine that you have. But basically, it's got a little guide and a little brush on the side, and the brush is there to help to keep your fabric flat. Keeps the needle clean actually as well. And the guide is there to tuck in any little tiny frayed edges that you may have. Basically, it helps to stop your fabric from fraying, so therefore your garments are going to last longer. So I'll pop the raw edge of my fabric right up against that guideline and choose a zigzag stitch. It'll take the point of the zigzag stitch very slightly over the edge of the fabric. I'll just move that straight thread out of the way. Any frayed threads on the hemline are then tucked in, and helps to stop the fabric from fraying in the future. So this could be the seam on a dress. If it's something that goes to the wash a lot, like bed linen or a cushion cover, then I suggest you finish off the seams like this. It looks more professional, but it also helps to make your project last longer as well. Obviously you'll use the same colour thread as you do your fabric, so that it makes a nice, neat, professional looking finish to your garments or to your project. Now this is the over edge foot that I'm using on the hemline of a dress, so that I can just fold the hem over once instead of twice, knowing that the hemline isn't going to fray. This is a 1/4 inch foot. They may look slightly different from different machines, but basically there's one hole in the centre, so you only use this with a straight stitch. Mine's got a little guide on the side, but the distance from that hole where the needle goes through to the edge of the foot is exactly 1/4 of an inch. So if you're a quilter, or if you're doing patchwork and your seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch is imperative, then this is the foot that you choose. Again, it's a clip-on foot on this particular machine. There's a gap in the centre of the foot to take your thread through to the back so that you can start sewing. And I put the guide right up on the raw edge of the fabric, or my seam. And I know that if I keep the fabric buttered up to that guide, my stitching will be exactly 1/4 of an inch. A satin stitch foot is clear, so you can see the stitches through the foot, but it's also got these two bars on the bottom of it. They're like little skis, and what they do is raise the foot up slightly so the foot doesn't flatten the satin stitch. Satin stitches and embroidery stitches tend to have a dimension to them, so it's nice to keep their shape, and you can see exactly what's going on. Maybe you're sewing around curves or hemlines, collars and cuffs, and you need to be precise with your stitching. You can see through this foot so you know where you're going. I'll just take my thread through to the back, put my fabric underneath, and I've just chosen quite a popular design, and that you can actually see the stitches coming through the back because, of course, again, that foot's clear. Now, a walking foot is invaluable if you are a quilter or if you're making curtains even. And the way that it works is to feed the fabric through the top at the same time as it does the bottom of the machine. So very much like the feed dogs on the bottom of the machine, your walking foot becomes the feed dogs on the top. Now, you'll need to unscrew the foot holder from the bottom of that shank. And important when you fit your walking foot back on again, that that little bar goes over the top of the screw that holds the needle in, because that's what makes it go up and down, and that's what makes it work. So just put the screw back in again. First time on a machine you may need to use a screwdriver to take it off, but if you just keep it finger tight, it's not going to work loose, that'll be fine. And then if I just turn the hand wheel towards me, just so I can show you slowly how this works. There you can see those little white teeth at the top drawing the fabric through at the same time as the feed dogs do at the bottom. So if you're sewing multi-layers of fabric like this quilted fabric, or even curtain fabric, which can be a different type of fabric to the curtain lining and it can slip, this helps to have, it gives you an even feed of fabric through the machine for a better finish.
Well, I hope that's helped. If you need any more help and advice, then you can contact myself or any of our other experts at sew.co.uk.